if you're ready to hit record. There we go. So again, welcome everyone to the second RAC meeting for the OWEB Small Grant Program rules revisions. We have a fairly light agenda, but we think we can work through a good chunk of the proposed rule revisions here this afternoon and get out of here by 4 o'clock pretty easily. So we'll start things off with a round of introductions. We'll do OWEB staff as well as RAC members. I think we have a few folks that are with the public who are interested. And we'll get to the agenda here in a moment, but we will have a public comment period for those that wish to provide public comment on the proposed rules revisions. So by way of introductions, I'll start with OWEB staff first, and we'll go with Eric Williams.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks again for being here for the second meeting of the RAC. I'm the Grant Program Manager at OWEB and looking forward to today's discussion.
Great, thanks, Eric. Kathy.
Hi, everyone. Kathy Leopold, OWEB Small Grant Program Coordinator.
Thanks, Kathy. Rachel.
Hi, everyone. Rachel Thompson. I'm the post-fire recovery specialist at OWEB, but I'm just here today helping out and taking notes.
Thanks, Rachel. Ivy, if you're still on the line. There you are.
I am. Good afternoon, folks. I'm Ivy Clark-Henry. I am an office specialist and I support the grant program with OWEB.
Thanks, Ivy. Okay, we'll go to RAC members and I'll go by order I see on my screen. We'll go with Andy first.
Hi, I'm Andy Gallagher. I'm the district manager for Cook SWCD.
Welcome, Andy. Karen.
Hi, I'm Karen Stutzman, Soil and Water Conservation District Program Lead based out of Salem.
Thanks, Karen. We'll go with Jordan.
Hi, everyone. I work for Yamhill Soil and Water Conservation District, and I'm based out of McMinnville, Oregon.
Welcome, Jordan. Zach.
Hi, folks. My name is Zach Mallon. I'm the Lower Nehalem Watershed Council Director.
Welcome, Zach. Let's go with Chris.
Sorry, did you say Chris?
Yes.
Chris Shadell with the Hood River Soil and Water Conservation District.
All right, welcome, Chris. Let's go with Nori next.
My name is Nori Wright, and I'm an office manager with the Gillum County Soil and Water Conservation District.
Thanks, Nori. Kelly.
Hey, good afternoon. This is Kelly Pinchak with the Lower Rogue Watershed Council out of Gold Beach, Oregon.
Right, welcome, Kelly. Let's go with Kaylee next.
Hi, I'm Kaylee Sowers. I'm the district manager for Coos County SWC.
Great, welcome, Kaylee. Let's see, Anna, welcome.
Hi, I'm Anna Rampin with the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde.
Great, thanks, Anna. Amber.
Hey, I'm Amber Kester with the Columbia Soil and Water Conservation District. I am the resource con here. Thank you.
Thank you, Amber. And Nicole.
Good afternoon, Nicole Sullivan, the Waihi Watershed Council Coordinator.
All right, welcome, Nicole. I think I got everybody with the OWEB staff and those on the RAC, but please raise your hand if I missed you and you're on the RAC. Super. Okay, so by way of agenda, we're going to be looking at the proposed rule revisions through sections 10 through 40 in the small grant program rules. Plan on spending really the bulk of the afternoon on those proposed revisions. Sections 10 through 30 will be kind of retreading some familiar ground as we kind of talked through that, at least some of the concepts at the last RAC meeting, but we had some, some, I think, more refined edits that we'd like the RAC to weigh in on. And then the section 40 is relatively new, but we think some of the proposed edits are pretty common sense and kind of build on the efforts on the proposed revisions of 10 through section 30. We'll take some breaks in here, so don't worry. We won't have just a bunch of staring at a screen for 2 hours. We want to make sure people able to step away from the screen for a few minutes. When we're done with those sections, we will have public comments. So if you're here just to listen, that's great. If you're listening and do want to provide public comments, I'll ask for a raise of hands at that time, and we'll just take it in order. We'll have 3 minutes for each public comment. We did have one written comment that was submitted, and that was forwarded to the RAC, and be sure to note that at that time period as well. After that, we have ample time for wrap up and next steps, and promise to get you out of here by 4 o'clock. So any questions on the agenda? Okay, great. So Rachel, if you don't mind, there you go. Thanks, Rachel. So we're going to start up at the top, and we're going to go through each section. We'll stop and make sure there's plenty of time for any questions, comments, any concerns that the RAC has on any of these revisions that have been made. So starting in section 10, we made our first edit here in 2F, which is the encourage partnerships, among which was watershed councils, SWCDs, and tribes. We changed that to eligible grant applicants and landowners, and that was in part based on the discussion at the last RAC meeting. So are there any questions on that one?
I think, we had public comment. One of them was to this. Do you want to wait to talk about that submitted public comment in that period about this piece?
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Thanks, Kelly. Because this actually gets at, I think, some of the other proposed changes in the rules.
Eric, yeah. I just had one comment.
Yeah.
In terms of the very last word there, landowners, I know the board has had some discussions as they're developing an equity resolution to broaden that a bit, and was just wondering if it's possible to describe landowners and operators, because sometimes our grantees might be dealing with, say, a ranch manager or someone who's not necessarily the landowner, but is knowledgeable and is implementing the project.
Great. Okay. Any other thoughts on this one?
I would just echo that that's a fair point. Most of our small grant projects, we're not dealing with the landowner, but just kind of have a formality of the signature of the landowner agreement. It's mostly managers. Yeah. So good point.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. Okay, Rachel, I think we're okay to move down to definitions. Okay, so we see in 1, we remove the reference to $15,000 as the cap here. Again, we talked a little bit about that last time, and we'll see language that reflects going to the board, OWEB board, at the beginning of each biennium, and having the board establish the maximum amount for the biennium for the small grant program. And we remove the program grants language and in 4, and we still have it as, yeah, thanks, Rachel. So in 5, which I guess will be the new 4, we'll have a small grant team agreement, which will be an agreement between OWEB and the small grant team regarding the allocation of small grant funds within a small grant area by the small grant team. And this is a place where we see we could add administrative funding to the small grant teams as a part of this agreement. We don't have language in there quite yet about that. And I don't know if we'd want to include amounts in rules anyway, but I want to just pause here for a moment and see what the RAC thinks about this definition, and if you think we need to add any language around adding administrative funding for small grant teams into this definition.
And you're looking at number 7 and 8?
No, I meant 5.
5. Okay, sorry. Thanks.
Yeah.
Are you saying that there's no language for grant administration funds anywhere else?
Well, this would be a place to potentially add it. Yeah, a sentence here.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I agree. I think some language would be, if it not added here somewhere.
Yeah, it seems like it may be more appropriate under the 20, like small grant program administered, but I don't know. That's up to you. I don't know if it's a definition. But again, I'm fine with it living in either place if that's what the board decides to agree upon. And then I just had a side question after that.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Kelly.
I just wanted to make sure I'm clear on like, if we do end up opening the grants to, all the other normal groups that the regular grant cycles are open to, that will all of our agreements still be between the small grant team and OWEB, and then it would just be like the project manager would change kind of like it is now? I mean, traditionally it's kind of been held in-house, so people that are accountable for all the things, but I was just wondering nuts and bolts wise if that's open to some nonprofit in your area, and then are they the project manager for that project, and then you're kind of still on the hook for all the deliverables technically.
So if it was a grant to, say, a nonprofit, eligible nonprofit, a small grant to an eligible nonprofit that was in your small grant team area, I'm going to look to Eric and Kathy here. My understanding is the way we've talked about it is that grantee would be the one that would be responsible for implementing that project and conducting the necessary reporting.
So the grantee enters an OWEB agreement, not the small grant team. Okay. Okay.
So here we're talking about the project level, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yes, who the applicant organization would, the eligibility would be opened up so that any eligible applicant who's eligible in other grant programs would now be eligible in small grant. And yes, the grant agreement would then be with that applicant organization, not with the team.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for that clarification.
Yeah, I was thinking about that in regards to insurance or like tort liability. So if they're all, I'm assuming that if they're already qualified for other OWEB grants, that they hopefully carry insurance to cover their employees' liability or whoever's or the, you know, in their contract language. I guess we don't really worry about that. I just never thought about it that way before.
Yeah, that insurance language is in the standard OWEB grant agreement that the nonprofit organization would be signing with OWEB.
Yeah, thanks, Eric.
Just so it doesn't come back to the, you know, affect the team.
That's right. Yes, it would not come back to affect the team contact.
Okay, so we have the possibility of adding a little bit of language into the definition of small grant agreement to include administrative funding from OWEB to the team. We could also look at that under section 20 as a place to include that language as well. Anything else on this one? Okay. So scrolling down, we removed 7 and 8. 8 was with you know, the advent of the online system and making this moot, as well as no longer utilizing fiscal agents. So any questions there? Okay. So we'll go down to section 20, the small grant program administered by small grant teams section. First, we have a little bit of cleanup here. We're changing the language in 1 to remove program and replacing that with small grant team. That's how it will fit within the definition above. This could be, now that we're paused here, this could be another place where we might want to consider adding that administrative language. So, Rachel, I don't know if you want to leave a comment or something that the small grant team administrative funding language could be added here.
We had conversations about what like funding for the admin of this program would look like or could look like.
Have we had conversations with that? No, not like specific numbers or anything to that.
We're just
Okay.
kind of all somewhat in alignment that their price should be a chunk of money of some sort available for the organization doing all the admin.
That's, I think, the extent of the discussion so far, Chris.
Okay,
And again,
thanks.
I think we'd want to stay away from putting in rule dollar amounts for a variety of reasons. One of which being kind of that we're just removing the cap right now, or suggesting that the cap be removed on small grants, is that things fluctuate over time, and we don't want to inadvertently sort of write ourselves into a corner here. But I think what we've talked about, at least internally, and then hopefully what came across during the first RAC meeting, is administrative funding sufficient to run this a new small grant team with potentially an enlarged applicant pool. So there'd be additional, an additional set of requirements for each small grant team, and we'd want to make any administrative funding commensurate with that.
Is just quickly while we're on this topic, talking about administrative funds, what's the background or the history in the small grant world of not having the choice between the NCRA or like 10%? Like if you have a federally, recognized indirect rate versus choosing the 10%, but it's only the 10%.
Kathy, do you know that history?
So again, I just point out that here we're talking about something a little different. Okay, but yeah, in the small grant project grants, we limited it to 10% and not accepting that federally negotiated indirect cost rate, because small grants are only funded with lottery state funding, and so we don't have federal funding involved, and we don't do all the federal reporting, or small grants aren't rolled into our federal reporting to our funders there. And so at that time, we then limited it to the 10% indirect.
Thank you, Kathy. I was mostly just curious about whether that was set that way. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and for the purpose, oh, go ahead, Kelly.
No, I was just going to mention, like, back to the topic we were on too. I mean, maybe it's just like the same way that you did the, you will no less than 15,000. I mean, if you feel like you had to add an amount, I would say do like a no less than versus a cap. Same.
Yeah, and I was just going to say these small grant team grants that we're talking about here would operate the same way as any other OWEB grant on a reimbursement basis for the work done to do your outreach to potential grantees, to process application cycles and so forth.
Right. Yeah, thanks. And thanks, Rachel, for those notes. Okay, any other thoughts on section 1 here? Okay.
I'm not sure this is pertinent to this part of the conversation. And again, I apologize for coming into last meeting late. So forgive me if we've already discussed this, but have we had conversations around all the other payments being held up if someone is delinquent on reporting?
I think we're just about going to address that in, or at least part of that in 3.
Okay, perfect. I will.
I could just chime in with one thing. Chris, we don't hold up payments for outstanding reports. We hold up new grant agreements. So yeah, just wanted to be sure.
Okay. So gonna if you want to scroll down just a little bit more to 3. So this section here talks about when OWEB will enter into new small grant team agreements, gives some stipulations as to how that will occur. And then the last bit of that sentence here is all representatives of the team have met OWEB reporting obligations under earlier agreements. So I'm going to pause here, as I know at least one of the RAC members has some thoughts on this one. So Jordan, do you want to?
Yeah, I guess this might kind of jump in.
Yeah.
So I'm new to this small grant team world, and this is my first biennium trying to get a small grant agreement approved. And we had like at least 4 or 5 of our 9 organizations with outstanding reports. So it was just kind of a struggle to get everybody have all those reports to date. And I guess my question is this kind of a standard requirement across all grant agreements, or could we make some language change to maybe it says all representatives of the team have met OWEB reporting obligations for small grant agreements. Maybe make it specific to small grant agreements. And then I guess my other question is, this doesn't necessarily dispense funds, it just makes funds available. And so there's also another check when we, on people's organizations, when we get a small grant project approved, that is when that organization would have to have all their outstanding reports up to date. And so this is kind of coming from, it was kind of out of nowhere from me being the small grant team lead for the first time, realizing that I had to start organizing with all my various organizations to make sure they got up to date. And it was a big reporting timeline, September, October. And so it's been, a challenge. So I was just wondering maybe background on that, and if there's any flexibility in that.
Yeah, thanks, Jordan. And I think if it's currently an issue, and it sounds like it is for at least some small grant teams, it would make sense that if the applicant pool was larger, that it would be potentially even more of an issue, trying to make sure that all the reporting had been completed on previous grants. So
is that our job, the small grant team's job? I guess technically it is then.
Well, so I think that's up for some discussion here. And Karen, I see your hand up.
So I know that a small grant team, if you have members of your team that are behind on their grant reporting, just as part of the way they work, so like regularly for extended periods of time, you can remove that member from the team. That's not what you want to do, right? With encouragement, you want to say, hey, we all want these funds and need these funds, explain everything. And if you're not getting anywhere, the end result could be that. So you can move forward.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, go ahead, Kelly. You're muted.
It helps if you unmute. Yeah, I was just thinking that's something we could throw, I guess, in like your local bylaws. We would be able to maybe introduce some language in there about that. Because I was just thinking, it's funny, that's why I asked the question earlier, is the agreement between, the applicant or not? But I'm still trying to figure out how the backlash might happen by opening it up. Because so far it's like everyone who applies is employed at our office. So it's pretty easy to run the traps on that. But yeah, if you have several outside organizations, there could certainly be a lot more running around trying to track people down and get them to do these things so that your projects aren't held up.
We had to do that, our team. It wasn't like a punitive action. She volunteered to remove herself because she was a small office and had a large reporting workload, and she knew she wasn't going to get it done. And so it was a collaborative thing. She just said, "Oh, just remove me from the team." And then after she got her obligations met, we just brought her back on again. So it doesn't have to be, like a big negative.
Thanks, Kaylee. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, would it be problematic, or what would be the consequence of if if different organizations are delinquent on their reporting? Could it just hold up grant agreements with that organization? I mean, is that like a Herculean change to the rules doing it that way?
That's a good question, Chris. That's sort of the way I've been thinking of this is, whereas we're talking now about the small grant team agreement, which would include some administrative funding for the small grant team. And the way my brain is thinking about this is that this would go to one entity. So it would be the lead, for lack of a better term, for the small grant team. And that lead would then kind of distribute the funding, the administrative funding, proportionally throughout the team membership. So in my mind, and I would look to Eric and Kathy here to check me on it, it would make sense to have the partnership lead, the one that's receiving this grant agreement, to be the entity that needs to be current on their reporting obligations. And for actual small grants that were made, the grant recipient would also need to be current on their grant obligations. But it would take away the some of the arm twisting that you might have to do behind the scenes to other small grant team members to make sure that they're up on their reporting. And before I see Nicole see your hand raised, I want to check what I just said and see if Kathy and Eric have any grave misgivings with that.
I don't have misgivings. I mean, you're right. So our potential future state is if we award the team agreement to basically, rather than being awarded to the small grant team, we award it to the team contacts organization, then there would be just that one group to need to be clear about standing reports. The current state already is that at the project grant agreement level, that project grant agreement is only held up by the grantee organization's outstanding reports. Does that make sense? So there's the two different types of grant agreements, the team agreement and a project agreement later on for the restoration work. Yeah, maybe I just made that worse.
Eric, that's along the lines of what I was thinking too, about this, although you raised something I hadn't thought about. And that is that the organization that is the small grant team contact that would then get a grant agreement with some funding attached to it to basically run the program could potentially pay certain amounts to other team members to share the workload. That could result in somebody getting a contracted services line item through the team contacts grant to an organization that does have outstanding reports. I don't know that matters, but it's just something that I haven't thought about. I think it's probably cleaner if we are going to make this a monetary grant agreement with the team contact to just do the outstanding reports review just on that organization and not on the other members of the team.
Okay. Thanks, Eric. Let's go Nicole and then Amber.
Yeah, this is Nicole Sullivan. I guess my thoughts were along the same exact lines, Eric, as maybe necessarily just the team, the organization that is the team. We struggle a lot, and other organizations do too, particularly on these ODA grants, these weed board grants. They seem to be late a lot, and so it really holds things up on a lot of different levels, and we're going through that right now. So yeah, I would say more particularly on the team, that the organization that holds the team, not necessarily on the team members. And I think that would make it a lot easier, because it is difficult reaching out to other people and having to, like, I don't know, you guys got to get your reports in. It's awkward. It's weird. So it makes it difficult.
Okay, thanks, Nicole. Amber.
Hi, I agree with everything said already. I would like to add, as a team lead, one of the things I've ran into is when we submit the reports on time or even early, particularly like our capacity grant through ODA, there's only a 16-day window for that deadline. So you can turn it in on the 1st of January. The deadline is the 16th, but it can sit with them for a substantial amount of time before they approve it. And so that would hold the whole team up, me as the team lead, and as the approved, fund holder or whatever. And I can't get them to go any faster. So perhaps some verbiage that you have submitted it on time, then you're okay. They could come back with some changes or requirements of the district, but I get my reports in on time. It's just getting them approved has been the thing that I have found difficult in the 3 years that I've been with the council. And I know that it's first come, first serve. So maybe if I get it in on the 10th, there could have been the people before me, but if I get it in on that 16th, I could be waiting a substantial amount of time for that to be approved. So that's just something I've noticed.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that feedback, Amber. Well, so let's try something here. If we go back up to the language, Rachel, under 3, if we just remove everything after the word worksheet, there, yeah. So if that's removed, and then so there's and then the comma, and we say and a revised application about. Oh, I'm sorry, Rachel. If you go up to the line above there, there's that other comma towards the end of that line. Nope, last one. And yeah, so and a revised application evaluation worksheet. Will that work to get at what we've been talking about? So seeing some nodding heads. So just to be clear, this would I think this would still require, if you are receiving any sort of grant, either being the small grant team agreement that comes with administrative funding, that entity would still need to be current on its reporting obligations. If you are receiving a actual small grant, you would need that entity would also need to be current on its reporting requirements before receiving agreements. Okay. And Nicole, I see your hand up.
Sorry, I forgot to take it down. My bad.
Okay. Okay, anything else on 3? Okay. Not seeing anything. Let's roll down to 4. So this is where we had spent some time at the last meeting talking about other members of the small grant team outside the tribes, watershed councils, and SWCDs. And this is the language that OEB staff has included here. So that's in the red revisions here. And it says, so small grant teams shall, in coordination with OEB, also invite in writing other eligible applicants in the small grant area to participate on the small grant team. Any eligible applicant that requests to participate on the small grant team shall become a member of the team. So in essence, what this means is that OEB would be providing to the small grant team a list of eligible applicants in the small grant team area. So it's based on the applications or the applicants that have come in for funding through OEB over the years. We know who they are and what small grant team they could be included in. So that doesn't preclude the small grant team, if they know of additional eligible applicants, to also put forth an invitation to those entities. But it would give you a pretty good starting point. So I'll pause there, see if there's any thoughts on that. Yeah, Kelly.
I'm just curious of, I was just thinking, I feel like we talked about this in the last meeting a little bit. I feel like Zach had some things that he was saying about whether people were on the team or not, that were also getting the awards. So this is basically saying then that anyone, so this is just eligible. This is not necessarily everyone who is eligible, but people who have actually applied to OEB grants in the past. Is that what you just said, Eric? That we would need to reach out to. And this isn't necessarily saying that they have to participate on the team, but it's saying that everyone who wants to can, and that's sort of the rules set forward by OEB. I'm just making sure I understand this language. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, so I mean, it's definitely an additional layer to think about if your team's getting bigger and bigger, and everybody's got to meet at the same time and get together and have consensus. Okay, I'm gonna munch on it for a sec.
That's fair. Yeah. Karen.
I was just thinking administratively as the team that the meetings are going to get longer in duration because you'll have more people voting and more input, and that it just, you know, brings in the whole facilitator. Hopefully people know how to facilitate meetings so they go on time. And or will there, I guess in the admin fee, you might want to put time in, make sure there's enough money allocated for extra time at longer meetings, as well as reviewing the grants, if we have a way to guesstimate that.
Yeah, I think we understand that this could definitely add extra complexity to small grant team meetings with more people, if the team itself actually has expanded in any substantial manner.
And I don't know if in the bylaws for small grant teams, if all small grant teams can do them differently, but you might maybe in the bylaws just have a minimum requirement of who needs to be there to run the meeting, so that you're not trying to wrangle lots of team members.
Yeah, and that's a good point, and it's I think at least partially covered in the language that is retained at the top of 4. We still have that tribe, SWCD, and watershed council language. Zach, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I remember from our last conversation that I think a big concern of mine with this section was around who we were expanding the team to include, for a lot of the reasons mentioned of time and wrangling and all of that kind of thing. And this language makes that very general sounding as far as, also invite in writing other eligible applicants in the small grant area in coordination with OWEB. And I'm wondering who we're talking about now, because we had some specifics last time and now I'm not seeing specifics, and that's just retaining the same concerns I had before about the team growing and issues that might come around with that.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. Actually, it's Chris. I see your hand up. Did you have a response or anything?
No, I guess I'd maybe just say the same thing, but a little bit more just in specifics to the language that's highlighted in red of I am not reading that as we are outreaching to people who have applied for OWEB grants before. I mean, I read that as anybody in the watershed that is eligible, which forgive me if I'm misspeaking, if that like includes nonprofits. Does that mean I need to like outreach to every land trust, every nonprofit, maybe just a little, yeah, exactly, to Zach's point of maybe let's just specify, because to me, I'm reading that the team needs to invite every single person who could possibly apply for a grant.
Okay. Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. It certainly can appear daunting. I think the intent here is we would start with a list of those eligible organizations that have applied in the past. And yes, there may be others out there. I think the team would have to think about, how it might reach other organizations. It certainly wouldn't be every nonprofit listed with the Secretary of State, because most of them don't do watershed work or aren't interested in watershed work. And so it is left a little open. And I think that's why the language says, invite eligible applicants. And as Eric said, we would provide that list, but there could be others out there. This is something, again, that's important to our board, making sure that maybe people who haven't worked with OWEB grants before and could have, fundable projects, we don't want to be excluding them. It's also one of the main reasons that we have a desire to move towards a funded team contact model, because we recognize that will take extra time from the small grant team contact to do that outreach and engagement. And to a point that was made earlier, it would run similar to the way that other OWEB grants run, in that its costs are reimbursable. And so, each team would have an agreement and would submit requests for payment similar to the way you do now. that provide the time records and other receipts for reimbursable expenses. But right now, I think, Zach, you're right. It's not a known finite universe of grantees, nor is there an expectation that you reach out to every single nonprofit that might be thinking of doing a watershed project. I think the expectation is that would probably evolve over time as more people learn about it and match up what their organization is doing with, hey, this program could fund things we want to do. They could touch base with the small grant team and begin participating that way. So it's a way to broaden the tent, but also recognize that there's increased costs to broaden the tent.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification, Eric. Yeah, go ahead, Zach.
It's a good clarification, and I appreciate that. I also, and I know it's not the same for everybody because I'm a one-person shop and not everybody is a one-person organization. But to an extent, while I advocated last time that the person managing the team should be getting some degree of compensation for doing so, it's not as simple as just having compensation available either, because there's also just only so many hours in the week before you're out of compliance with labor laws. So, just like broadening the tent is always good, right? It's always something I want to advocate for. And I'm also anxious about the next time an organization like mine has their turn running their small grant team, because it can take up a lot of time.
Yeah, thanks, Zach.
Yeah, it's an interesting space to just think about the expansion. I don't want to be negative about any of it, but I'm just trying to think of all the ins and outs of what could be or what wouldn't be. And honestly, I think, some of us too in more rural areas probably won't see, the kind of expansion that maybe my brain is thinking or wanting to overreact to. And I think for us, mostly it's just, there's a lot of information I think that gets discussed in those meetings too, sometimes with landowners and, how people manage their land and those kind of things too. So I think, my only concerns is making sure that everybody's on the same page with transparency, but also with, what sort of stays in the room and what doesn't leave if you have someone interesting or who comes in who's maybe in more of an advocacy realm or something like that versus. So those are just some of the things I'm thinking about as I'm thinking about all the management of this. But again, in my area, I don't think it would be too much more expansive. I'm just trying to think of who will be sitting at the table.
Yeah.
In the next.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. Amber, I see your hand up.
One of the things I think might help on with the exact situation is keeping people on longer so that they build that experience, because I think when you're trying to learn the process every single time, and I know each group chooses to do that differently, but I can see now going into my second biennium that I'm learning a lot more and understanding the process is better, which the time I feel it's going to take to do things is going to be a lot less. So maybe not that constant turnover that some groups might choose to do. Having somebody who is very knowledgeable on the team and can answer those questions and work through the process a little bit more efficient could benefit the team. So less turnover. I do think it's exciting to open this opportunity up to some of the friends of, or, these nonprofits that are working really hard to get stuff done in these very under serviced areas. So as our team lead, I think I'd be happy to invite those people to the table and have an opportunity where I wouldn't necessarily have to do it for them. They could be doing it for themselves, and that's going to free up a lot of my time. There's only so much funding available. So you're really only going to be processing the amount of projects that you can, which you do the math, you divide 15 by 100,000 in 2 years, you can only do that many projects. So if other people are taking on that project load for you, essentially you're going to be doing less work because you're not having to project manage them all yourself. So I think this is pretty exciting.
Oh, that's an interesting perspective. Thanks, Amber. Chris, and then Anna, I saw your hand up too.
Yeah, I just wonder if there's any talk of, instead of doing the admin cost as a reimbursable like hours or like, you know, dollar per time spent, if there could just be kind of a like percentage or like lump sum that is maybe somewhat generous. You know, to Zach's point, there is only so many hours in a day. And when, you know, admin kind of comes at like 15 minutes here, 10 minutes there, but throughout, you know, continuously throughout a year, I don't know, just kind of a thought. I sit on a board of a conservation district in Washington, and their indirects are at a minimum 25%. And the more and more I just give thought to kind of, you know, especially with these small grant programs, like 10% on a small grant, you know, it keeps us hand to mouth. It doesn't ever let us build any reserve or anything. And when things are strictly bill per hour, well, we're going to max that out. You know, yeah, we only have so many hours. So I wonder if there's just a way to get away from billing per hour and just do a either lump sum or percentage fee. Just a thought.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. My response there is I totally understand that. We have other program rules that have requirements on how requests for funds needs to occur. So we're a little limited there as to how, you know, the system of requesting and receiving funds could be altered to the small grant program. There's other mechanisms, though, that I think could make this a fairly straightforward process, where we have kind of simplified grant applications that are pretty cut and dry, that shouldn't take that much time for the team lead to develop, and should lead to hopefully, you know, a more streamlined approach when it comes to, you know, requesting and receiving funding. And again, we're talking about sort of programmatic funding for the small grant team, which is different than the 10% that the grantee would receive for the project level grants. Okay, I thought I saw another hand up. No? Okay. This is a good discussion. Okay, so if there's no other thoughts on that first part of, or the first revision in section 4, we also have the changes here that make the maximum amount for the small grant, for small grant projects, change from 15,000 to what the OWEB board adopts at the beginning of each biennium as a part of their spending plan. And we also have language there based on, I think, a comment that somebody made at the last meeting, that the maximum amount adopted by the board shall not be less than $15,000. So thoughts on that? Does it look okay? Okay, what's some thumbs up? All right. Well, before we move on from 4 entirely, I want to give, I mean, we had a good discussion there, so I want to make sure that people are comfortable with this language. If there's anything left to be said, I see that Rachel has some extensive notes. It sounds like we're okay to move on.
Shoot, Eric, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Karen.
So just thinking logistically, like Amber was thinking, you only have so much money over a year, so you only have so many grants to administer. You have to offer the grant at least 4 times a year, but you may run out of money a lot earlier. I don't know if that's, I guess that each team will have to just think about how much they want to spend each time, or if it makes more sense just to do it during the work windows or something like that. I don't know, just thinking.
Yeah, and there's some language that'll be coming up here that we can probably chew on that as well. But yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Karen. Yeah, Nicole.
I guess I would just reiterate, if the board is going to increase the amount above 15,000, we need to look at, the overall cap of the 100,000 too. So it's all relative, I guess, but if the board is gonna decide what the cap is on each small grant, then I mean, it lowers the amount of projects we can do, and it kind of goes back into that. We can only do so many projects, and then, ideally we'll be out of money pretty early. So I don't know if there's a way to think about that, or if they increase it, then maybe our overall team amount needs to increase as well. Just something that I have thought about.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, if the cap is raised, in addition to each team receiving administrative funding, the $100,000 would obviously be a lot less for that small grant team to go into projects. So that would definitely be something that would need to be taken into consideration. Amber, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, she pretty much asked the same thing.
Yeah.
I was just wondering because I didn't make it to the last meeting, and I did try to listen to the video, but I was just curious if I had missed a conversation about increasing the total funding amount, and that answers the question. No, that has, that's not up to us. I just was curious if it had been discussed. So thank you.
Yeah, and it's this isn't something that's typically a part of the program rules for any of our grant program, but just for the sake of RAC members and for anybody listening, the way that the OWEB boards basically sets up the grant programs for the biennium is through the approval of a spending plan that happens at the beginning of each biennium. And by way of background, how those come about is kind of a long multi-month process. And typically at the board meeting before the board adopts a spending plan, there's a good chunk of the meeting that's dedicated to spending plan items. And that's where you'll see staff recommendations when it comes to various grant programs that are on the docket for the next biennium. So I would advise you that if you're paying attention, it's a good time to provide some public comment on what is being proposed during those spending plan meeting items that come before the board, particularly in that April of odd numbered years, because it's a big chunk of that board meeting. So little digression, but it's relevant to small grants. Okay. That's packed a lot of meat into that, to number 4 there. It's good. So scroll down to 9, we have just some edits that are making the language consistent, kind of similar to the top, removing program, replacing it with small grant team. Similar in 10. And here in 14, and this is getting at, I think, Karen, your comments there about the potential for a team to run out of funding within a biennium.
Mm-hmm.
So I made some changes here. And I'll give folks just a minute to read what's in 14. And see if there's questions or comments. And I can think of one, if there isn't any.
So just to make sure I'm understanding it right, it's basically getting rid of the windows, and the year will be able to apply at any time, and then we'll determine cutoff dates of when we review and recommend for funding the applications 4 times throughout the year.
Yes.
Gotcha. Thanks. Yeah, we just made that change. The district manager here just saw, I think it was Deschutes had done that, and we were like, oh, that's a good idea, because before you couldn't even start writing the application until that 2-week window was open, and it's like, well, that's silly. I want to write it when I have time. So yeah, I think it's a good change.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Kelly.
So then that technically means basically when we submit those timelines for the meetings, those will go into August. Those will get entered in the back end then, but everybody might have a different review date. Am I understanding that correctly then?
So the review, I think, let me think about this.
It's okay. It's more like a background question for you guys more than us, I guess,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah, we can chew on that. Something that Karen mentioned has me thinking about adding some additional language here around if funding is available, teams shall accept applications at any time throughout the state fiscal year. I mean, if a team uses up its funding in one fiscal year and doesn't have any remaining for the second, the way this language reads right now, you might think that they still have to accept grant applications. So we may want to add a qualifier.
That sounds good. If you
Okay.
do it that way.
Great.
And that's what I was thinking, maybe if you reorganized your team to accept applications in the non-work period times, like in the winter time or on shoulder seasons, then you could start the work and not worry about running out of money, because at least you've got projects going at the right time of year. I don't know.
Yeah. Jordan, see your hand up.
Yeah, I guess correct me if I'm wrong. I thought last meeting some people had discussed that maybe 4 times a year is too many times. I'm just wondering what people would be open to if it followed kind of like the restoration grant theme of this 2 times a year minimum. Or are we saying 4 times within the biennium?
Well, the way that these rules are written now, it's 4 per fiscal year. And part of that is this is a responsive grant program and to turn around and get things on the ground. But curious what others think.
Yeah, I like the openness because there's different projects. I mean, we do different projects in the winter than we do in the summer. So I'm honestly, with the 4 times a year, I really like it because it helps me to time my project exactly to where I want to begin my implementation. So it does allow it, I think, to be a little more laser focused. You know, and this just does say at a minimum. You could change it to less, I guess, than the 4, but I think it's nice as a grantee and a person on the team. I enjoy that.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. So, thumbs up from Amber. Zach, see your hand up.
We've had with our team, we're roughly every other month having an opening, and so we are regularly reviewing grants, but or opening it up. But a lot of those cycles, nobody has a project ready, right? And so it's really helpful to have the availability. And I think the bigger thing I have around doing that many of them, and so we do roughly 6 a year, right, is that the online system doesn't make it super easy to check and see if anybody's submitted. And so if nobody is contacting you as the lead of your small grant team to check to see if there's a grant that needs to be reviewed by the team, then you don't know if it's if you're going to find anything there or not. And I'm sure you're going to be fixing the labeling of each cycle from the way it was this last time around, the last biennium. But because it just said small grant team number blank, and then there was a drop down of all the different times the grant was open or the offer was open, but not a distinguishing characteristic between them, like a date with it or something. It made it confusing to try and locate grants when they had been submitted. So as long as that was different, there's no real barrier to or problem with having more than 4, and I really like having 4. I really like having 6 rather, but that system fix would save time for the person reviewing grants, because they'll not spend time double and triple checking through all the options of the different grant open periods that all look the same if nobody's submitted anything, so you're not even sure if you've changed anything. Yeah, so that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. I'm living in the veil of ignorance here on that one, but I'm looking at Kathy nodding her head, so I'm making the assumption that she understands and thinks that there's a potential solution here. So
Kathy and I had several conversations about it while I was a team lead, so I'm not surprised she's nodding her head.
Yeah, my apologies for that. And I did fix it this biennium, so you will notice an improvement. I apologize for that first time out.
It's okay, and I won't notice it. I'm not in charge anymore.
great, thanks, Kathy. Nori, I see your hand up.
Yeah, and hopefully Kathy can kind of help me with this. We ran into some issues with ours, and I'm trying to think of how we set it up. But basically, the way our team is organized is that we meet once a month. It's on the 3rd Tuesday of every month is when we're scheduled to meet as a team. I send out the reminders. And if for some reason we don't have any applications, our application window is opened other than when it has to be closed. Correct, Kathy? And it was super smooth for us, just because, and part of the requirements of our team would be that the applicants, when they submitted, also had to send an email to the small grant team to contact as well, to let them know that they had submitted an application. I also would go through on the same day every month and check to make sure. But we had a few hiccups in the beginning, but once we did ours like that, it's been super smooth for us, just because I guess the easiest way to say is we're all trained. We know we have a meeting every month, and if for some reason there's no applications and we're still meeting our quota of how many times we have to meet, I'll send an email out to everybody saying, hey, are there going to be any applications? You know, I know we're all short on time and capacity. Do we need to meet? Do we have any questions, upcoming things to address? And if the answer is no, we go to we say, okay, well then next month, we'll have a meeting. So that's kind of how we stepped around. Kathy, it was more me having confusions and kind of dropping the ball on some applications in the beginning as I learned the process. So that's just our 2 cents on how we kind of fixed that confusing window.
Okay, thanks, Nori. Okay, sounds like we're okay with the language as proposed with the if funding is available tweak. But before I move on, any other thoughts on 14? Okay. Okay, so moving on, we eliminated the old 15 that just wasn't current anymore with our systems. And the new 15 has been revised, and I'll let folks read that and see if there's thoughts on this language. Okay. Okay, well, if we're good with the new 15, there was some other changes actually made. I want to make sure people see the strikeouts towards the bottom there. Some of this is just kind of updating around language. We don't have fiscal agents anymore. And if we're good, then we can just keep scrolling down to what is now the new 17. So this was after our discussion at the last RAC meeting. We just eliminated the requirement for the small grant team to provide the biennial report to the Soil and Water Conservation Commission. If that is something that's a priority for the commission, we could just forward it. We meaning OWEB could just forward it to the commission, we think. And Karen, I see you've come off mute, and I think you may have done some background research on this, so I'll let you have the floor.
Well, so I did ask the question to the chair of the commission, and they actually would like the summary biennial report forwarded to them.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that's no problem if we're getting these reports to make sure that the commission is receiving those.
Just because at the last meeting, someone brought up the very good point that it's a good way to see which districts may not be using the program and have the commission member inquire, see how things are going, or if there's things they can help with, or.
Yep. Yeah, that sounds good. So yeah, I don't think there's any problem in us compiling those and sending them along. And then the last change we have here is on the new 19.
So hold on, just real quick. We are going to add in the language up there though, because right now it still says the small grant team will be responsible for that. But it looks like the note will say the OWEB board. I mean, like, is it still us?
So we'll take that. So the way that it reads now, small grant team will be responsible providing OWEB.
I see. I thought you had annexed that. I apologize, Eric. Yeah. The soil and water part. Okay.
Yeah. So we could just remove it from the rule and make sure we have, just sort of informally sending that along to the commission.
Could say OWEB to forward to SWCC liaison, which is me, because I'm the one who puts all their meetings together and all that stuff. So. Yeah.
So Karen, do you want it in rule, or
is
it okay to?
Yeah, it's okay to just forward it to me.
Okay. I mean, I think either way, we're fine with it, as long as you're comfortable knowing that you'll get that information.
That's
fine. Okay. So in the new 19, change this so that small grant teams will retain the meeting records for 5 years. We took out the application language, as that's something that is online now. So that's not something that the small grant teams need to retain, because we have it in our system. Questions on that? And if not, I think we might be ready for a break before we move on to section 30. that work for folks? Okay, so let's return at 2:45. Thanks. Okay, so we are at 2:45. Welcome back. Hopefully everybody was able to step away from their computer for a few minutes there. Okay, so we will begin in 695-035-0030, which is the small grant. We've changed this to team application. I think it better reflects what this rule is discussing. So starting with at the top, we eliminated the eligible entities to submit an application in their small grant program. This language then reverts to the eligible entities then that are found under OWEB's grant program rules, or Division 5. So basically, by removing this language, it allows for any other eligible applicant to now be eligible to apply for OWEB's small grant program. And I'll stop there and see if there's any questions on that. Okay. I mean, we did discuss it in length at the first meeting, so we can then move on to number 3. So this is about the technical guidance for applicants. So we changed that to the latest edition of the technical guidance, and then removed references down below to specific dates. So if and when these documents are updated, applicants can review the most recent version of these and not be beholden to something that is 20 or more years old, as required in the rules. So questions there, or any comments?
This is Kelly. I just wanted to quickly, I don't know if there's any way to signal on the last, opening up the eligibility. I think that's great. I'm just wondering, is there a way to signal to the board? I'm not gonna I don't want to mess with this version, but is there any way to signal to the board that this is a little bit of a caveat to really considering an administrative fee to go along with this too? Like if they do want to expand the program, that they really should also consider the other. Is there any way that you guys can sort of, I guess, create an emphasis on, we're totally willing to have an open, application for all these folks like this, but that it does possibly impact?
Yeah, Kelly, I think absolutely that both the expanding the small grant teams and the applicant pool lends itself well to
Perfect.
that.
Okay.
Yeah. And
thank you, Eric.
Hopefully we'll make that clear when we're bringing this before the board.
I trust you.
Thanks for bringing that up. Okay. So then, yeah, thanks, Rachel. If we scroll down a little bit more, in 5, we removed the language around project management. So basically the new language says that, you know, changes in budget line items are permissible with prior removal from OWEB. So project management's not a budget category anymore, and want to make sure that all these budget categories are open to changes with approval from OWEB. And go ahead, Karen, and then Nicole.
Did you want to change number 4 at the end of the sentence? Eligible by the small grant team in their operating procedures may serve as fiscal agents. Are they still serving as fiscal agents for the grant project? Or is that, I thought I was understanding that's being taken away?
Yeah, I think that's a good catch. Yeah, I think unless I hear disagreement, that we could strike number 4 in its entirety. I'm looking to Kathy and Eric for confirmation on that.
I think that's right.
I think it's right. I may need to do just a little bit of just confirming with fiscal staff on that, but yeah.
So I think we say earlier in the rules that, you know, anybody essentially that's eligible for an OWEB grant is eligible for a small grant. Yeah. And I don't think we need the term fiscal agent in here.
Steve Graper.
Hi, Steve. It's Cindy Sue calling with Blackfoot County Bank.
Hi there.
Ooh, just in time. We did not
I know,
want to
we
hear
didn't
that
want to hear
banking
that.
conversation.
Just in time. Okay. So other questions on any of these changes up till 5, and then we can go into 6. Okay, not seeing or hearing anything. So we did take out 6 here, and this was discussed at the last meeting. We know folks had some challenges around particularly getting landowner signatures with applications. So removing this language here reverts it to OWEB's general grant program rules, which is you need to have a signed landowner agreement before first payment. So it precludes the need to have landowner signature at the time of application. So it seems like there's some good concurrence there, which based on last meeting, not surprised. But any questions or concerns with that? Okay. So moving down, so next section, we didn't discuss anything related to this at the last meeting, but we thought a lot of these made sense based on kind of the direction things were going the last meeting, and then there's some kind of general cleanup associated with this particular section as well. So this is section 40, the small grant project grants. We've suggested changing the language in 2 to be consistent here with prior language, so eliminating the $15,000 cap and having the amount determined, the maximum amount determined by the OWEB board. Kelly, see your hand up.
Yeah, I just had a quick question about, and maybe I just didn't recognize this before, but my understanding was you couldn't do basically the same project on a landowner. You can't come back and work in the same riparian area, do a project. But I'm wondering if you had, because this says per landowner, which maybe that was already in there and I just didn't recognize that. But like, you could have separate projects on a landowner's property. So is this saying that your one landowner can only receive one project per year?
Yeah, and that was language that was existing language.
Okay. Surprise to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Does it need to be in there? Do people want it in there? I don't know.
I mean, I think the reason it would be there is, and I maybe have a hard time seeing anybody game a system this way, but you could potentially get multiple small grants on one property, one dealing with riparian, another dealing with upland, and maybe a different type of an upland project somewhere else within the same year, and it kind of getting away from the spirit of the small grant program. Again, I have a hard time seeing somebody kind of game the system, but that's why I think originally it was probably in here like that. So, okay, so in 4, we took out fiscal admin, replaced it with indirect costs, which reflects kind of the current language. And then removed the language in 5 about fiscal agent. Then Rachel, if you want to keep scrolling down. Okay, in section 8, again, this is just kind of updating to the current way things are done. We have an online project completion report, so the match is submitted through that. It's not an actual match form anymore. And similarly in 10, just reiterating that at the end of a project, grantee will be submitting the project completion report, which includes the photographs and captions that go along with that already. And see, the remainder in 11 is just consistency there, adding project to the small grant to make sure consistent with the language there and clear that we're talking about small grant projects. And also removing fiscal agent again in G. And then in the big B, we've got updating. So in addition to a spreadsheet, we have or other report documenting all project expenses. We know people who use QuickBooks or other accounting software. So just making sure we're current there on how folks are utilizing technology. Eliminated C, as that again is included in the project completion report, so no need to have this here. And moving into what will be the new C, that just reiterates what the project completion report entails, including the project match that is 25%. Realize there's a typo
There you
there.
go. That's all I was saying.
And thank you, Rachel. And I think that's pretty much it with this section. So a lot of just sort of updating here, but I'd want to pause and see if there's questions. Okay, not seeing any.
Just a quick question. Are we getting rid of the photograph requirement, or is that just said somewhere else?
Yeah, sorry, I don't think I was super clear there. The project completion report already has photograph requirements in there. So basically it's
Gotcha.
saying,
Thank you.
yeah, just do what's required in the
redundant.
PCR. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So that concludes as far as we wanted to get with the rules today. At the next meeting, we'll get into the eligible and ineligible small grant projects, as well as go back and kind of show any of the changes that were made as a result of the discussion today. But we really want to spend the bulk of the next meeting on the next couple of sections. And then at the meeting after that, we hopefully will be wrapped up with the substantive elements of these rules, and we can kind of go back and make sure everything is kind of lined up with an eye in particular in the definition section, making sure that we're being consistent there. So yeah, thanks, Rachel. And with that, our next agenda item is to see if there's any public comment. So if you're here from the public and wish to make comments, you could please use the raise hand feature and I will call on you in the order that I see you. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody wishing to provide verbal public comment. I will note again that we did receive one written comment from Blaine Schoolfield with the Marys River Watershed Council. The comment discussed the importance of measures for to reduce beaver human conflicts and how the small grant program might play a role there. Adding the beaver restoration guidebook from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and others to the list of accepted technical resources. And with regards to raising the funding cap, noting that it would be beneficial, but also a caution for there to be a reasonable limit there so that one or a small number of projects would not absorb the entirety of the available funding, and also support for administrative funding for small grant teams as the applicant and potentially the teams will have grown bigger given these potential rule changes. Okay. So if there's no other comments, we can probably wrap things up a little bit early today. Our next meeting is, I believe, on January 11th. And we'll be getting out, as we did before this meeting, the revisions to the rules that are in the next sections around eligible and ineligible projects, as well as the changes that we'll make as a result of this meeting. I'll stop, see if there's questions. Amber, I see your hand raised.
So I'm not familiar with how this process works, but I completely love Blaine's point of view here and would like to see these incorporated. What's the next step in doing so? OWEB discuss this? Is the RAC discusses it? Like how does that process work? And if
so, yeah, thanks, Amber. I think so. There's eligible projects kind of point to this, to the public comment. So we'll discuss that as the RAC at the next meeting. We did talk today about the points around the funding cap, and maybe not as much around kind of a maximum amount, but I think that's something that the board would be determining anyway. And then the importance of having that administrative funding for small grant teams. I think the one thing that we could potentially talk about in the time we have here is the accepted technical resources, the suggestion to add the beaver restoration guidebook.
Yeah, thank you, because we kind of had skipped, by this coming in after that, we were kind of skipping over the original comment of when do we discuss this. So that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll open it for the group. I mean, I don't have a lot of familiarity with this guidebook, but it sounds like others potentially do. So can open the floor.
I'll just jump in one more time and say if we do want to revisit it, if we add the language later on, if others are in favor of adding beaver analogs and other things of that nature into our, because I have a property right now that this is like literally this morning was having a meeting, like how cool would that be to be able to incorporate that piece, and hearing that the funding could be a little bit more. It might be just the difference on this particular piece of property that could make that happen. So maybe it's not the time to discuss it until we talk about what is eligible for funding, but it is a good reference if we went that way.
So tying it into the eligible funding discussion. Okay, that sounds reasonable. Kelly, and then Karen, I see your hand up as well.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to find my lower hand. I was just gonna say the same thing that she said, added into the eligible, because I think I'm totally for it. I think it's a great idea. And if we do add that, I think it's great to add the guidebook as well. It is a Fish and Wildlife guide, so it's very well put together. But that's just my 2 cents. I'm happy to cross the bridge when we get there.
Sounds good.
Yep, same thing. It only brought to my mind that in the guidebook there could be some actions that you take that are non-permanent. So we might have to look at whether or not some of the practices are fundable or not. But
okay, yeah, good point, Karen. Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say something along the lines of what Karen just said. And I think just something for everyone to think about between now and the next meeting is, and I'm not that familiar with the guide, but trying to distinguish between actual restoration practices that might be in the guide and things that might be considered maintenance, like taking an existing culvert and putting in a beaver deceiver. I don't know that we would want to consider that as eligible. So I think we'd want to make sure we've got the right parameters around restoration practices.
Yeah, Eric. Okay, yeah, Chris, go ahead.
As far as the technical guides go, is there like a finite list or that like OWEB is like housing for references, or has that been like reviewed for being complete just kind of as time has moved forward? I'm not super familiar.
Yeah, I don't know if we have what one would term a complete list of references there. I mean, we're broader when it comes to other grant types. We're, I think, a little more narrowly focused here because of the maybe a little less experimental nature of the small grant program, where it's kind of these tried and true methods that we encourage folks to implement on the ground in kind of very short time frame, given the small grant program, the spirit of the small grant program. But I think we are certainly open to things like the Beaver Restoration Guidebook, if they kind of meet those benchmarks of being like widely accepted across the industry and can lead to more effective restoration getting on the ground in a fairly short manner. Yeah, Jordan.
If we did run into an issue of accepting the whole Beaver guideline book as a different resource, I know NRCS does approve of Beaver Dam analogs as is, as a practice code. So there is that.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, yeah, good food for thought for the next meeting. Okay. So anything else for the good of the order? Okay, well, great. Well, thank you so much for the good discussion today. We made some really good progress, and really appreciate, as always, OWEB rulemaking advisory committees are fantastic, and this one is no different. I'm continually amazed by the level of expertise and willingness to hop on and provide your input on things like this, and it's really couldn't do it without y'all. So appreciate it and appreciate you. With that, we'll wrap up this meeting and hope everyone has a good holiday season and Happy New Year, and we'll see you early on in that new year. Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks all.